Hello and welcome back, KMA Tribe, friends, family, and everybody who has found this podcast today. I am so excited today because I have Miguel Martinez with me. Thank you, sir, for making some time for us.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
And for those of you that don't know Miguel, he's a successful business leader. He is a powerful social media influencer. He's an incredible father, a great leader, and he's a future black belt at KMMA. And Miguel, I also happen to know that you are a rags to riches story. And I also happen to know that you're an amazing communicator. And for all of these reasons, I queued all that up, both to let the audience know, but to let you know that I think that we're just going to have a lot of fun having a freestyle kind of conversation. And I didn't want to limit it by making like really, really structured questions. What I'd like you to do is talk as much on all of those things I just talked about, as you want to, and we'll just kind of have a conversation.
Okay, no pressure, huh? Well, yeah. First, again, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure also to speak with you on your platform, and I have no doubt that whatever comes out of this, at least there will be one nice nugget for someone to be inspired by or to take forward. So, is there anything specific you'd like for me to start with?
Well, maybe. I mean, it wouldn't hurt. I kind of put a real broad brushstroke that you're a successful businessman and
Yes.
and you're a social media influencer. Maybe you could talk a little bit to either or both of those first.
So it's interesting. So in order to even understand that, it's probably better to just to go back a little bit, because there was a major transition that took place before we even arrived to where we are, right? And it's important for a viewer to understand that, because there'd be so many question marks for someone listening. But I mean, you labeled it as rags to riches, so we'll go to that point. I don't think I've achieved all the riches that God has for me yet, but I've definitely come a long way, and I like to credit that to the fact that, like a lot of people in this world, I was born very humble. I was very it just was tough growing up, but sometimes it's and many times it's not how you start, right? It's how you finish. And I was not a product of my environment, meaning in my result. Somewhere along the way, I had this extra something in me that just refused to let the circumstance be the end result. So where a lot of my counterparts maybe didn't have that outcome, right? They're locked up or dead or on drugs or wherever you have it, which happens when you grow up in an unfortunate circumstance. But I've always had at least one or two people around. God, my grandma used to say growing up that God always has a ram in the bush, right? So it was always one or two people, and often most non-family members, that either always took a liking to me or gave me some advice. And I was just one of those kids that listened. And I was able to decipher what was good versus what was bad. I was able to discern that very young. And I believe that was a strong gateway to, as I traveled my path, that kept me from getting out of trouble. And if I did get in trouble, it was nothing that would affect me long term. Back then it was tough, but as I became an adult, I realized that that was what was supposed to happen to me. I was supposed to be brought up in those unfortunate circumstances, difficult environments. I was forced to develop a very strong skin. And again, when you're in it, it doesn't feel so good. But when you begin to come out of it, you realize that it's preparing you for something that you can't see. And as life began to unfold and take place, all of those struggles became very powerful tools and assets, because when I was faced with adversity, or when I was in a circumstance where I had to depart from somebody, I had this real strong mental toughness that I said, look, I know what the bottom feels like, and this situation is much better than the bottom. So it gave me that fuel to propel even forward. And that's really, as life began to take shape for me, I was always blessed in the sense of, no matter how bad it was, I always came out on top. And I'm to this day very appreciative of that benefit.
You hit so many important leadership principles already, of course, right? Like through that, right? Like there's ones that, like, people, my audience listening, so many of them being our students, right? Are oh, life is 10%. What happens is 90% how you react to it.
Yeah.
Everything happens for a reason, and it serves us well. But you also brought up a couple things that we talk about less, but that are equally important. Like one, the value of mentorship, right? The value, the mentorship and the followership. Not just that you found good mentors, not just that there were men and women that were willing to sow into you, which is so critical, but that you were willing to listen and take the advice. That's the thing that most people miss. And then it's almost ironic to me, but of course, it's a misuse of the word, because everything's a God incident, right? Like,
Sure.
that this morning I just started meditating on, some of my background and stuff had led me to spend several decades of my life in that condition that so many find themselves. I only got to thinking about it because I'm dealing with some young people dealing with it now,
Right.
right? That dealing with the, am I good enough? Am I good enough?
100%. Yeah.
And and then so I thought to myself, well, but how come, like, because the people that I'm talking about have allowed themselves to be stalled by that
Right.
thought. And I remember what was different for me, and what was different for me was I actually took that as fuel to prove something, right? Like, so I was always trying to become better. I was always working harder. I was always like doing whatever it would take. And that's not necessarily, by the way, healthy way to live all the time or anything. I'm not,
Right.
but I'm just saying that it became that kind of fuel, whereas for other people it stopped. And then I started reading a book this morning, and it's on what you just said. The book is I forget, Ryan something, and the book is called The Obstacle Is the Way.
Yeah.
And like you just said, like, if you not had all that background to develop you into the man you became, you may not have became the man you became, right? Like,
Listen, later in life, I literally stumbled, fell, rolled over, fell through a cliff, and fell into the diamond industry. I'm the furthest thing from the diamond industry, right? But oftentimes the powers that be have a different path for you, and if you follow most of the path right, you'll end up where you belong. And so in that setting of being in the diamond business, I had to learn as much as I could in a short amount of time about diamonds, how they're formed, how they're polished, manufactured, how they go to market. And one thing about the diamond that I'm sure everyone has heard before is that you learn about how much pressure that the earth puts together in order to form that diamond. So without pressure and massive amounts of pressure, a diamond can never shine and sparkle as much as it is. And that's not a metaphor, that's true to fact.
sure.
So as I became older and much more wiser and embrace knowledge much more, which now I'm such a lifelong learner. You have a ton of books behind you. Above my head, I have tons of books. So now I'm much more into that. But I started reflecting when I learned about diamonds, right? And then I said, wow, that's kind of like your life, right? So if you look at somebody that's been through a lot, they have this fortitude and this force and discipline of not worrying about the small stuff, and they try to really laser focus on the goal. And they don't always have to have the right roadmap. But the point is that rather than standing here planning, they understand that where they've come from, time is not on their side. They've got to do it by any means necessary. And I realized that in learning that pressure makes a diamond, I would never change my life. And it was some tough days, right? It was a tough years, but I would never change that if it meant I could not be the person that I am now. And it's when you appreciate it later in life. And I speak, I mentor a lot of younger kids, and when they say how rough things are, I said, this could be the greatest blessing for you ever, but you have to be willing to see it through and not question it. And that's hard, right? That's hard for all of us in some situations, but it's been a eye-opening experience for me. And I try to model that with my daughter, that when she makes a terrible mistake and it's tough for her, I actually push her deeper into the stress of why it's tough, because if she learns that young, the world is not going to be delicate with her, right? The world doesn't really care what happened to you when you were little and all of these. They don't care. You care. Maybe the people close to you care, but the world doesn't. So I can either prepare her for what, like as if daddy going to always be there to hold her, or I can prepare her truly and give her a dose of what the world will experience, so that when she experiences it that way, because she's not growing up as rough as I did. But what I can do is instill some of the lessons and allow her to fail forward young without breaking the fall all the time. And I think that will help her out a lot as she become older.
Well, as you were talking, I was going to go one way, but then you brought up Michaela, and Michaela is like the most impressive 6-year-old I've ever met. And it obviously comes from your leadership and moms, and you guys are, I mean, the things that we're still struggling to develop in grownups
Yeah.
sometimes, she's got, right? Like she's got the hunger, she's got the focus. She's like, she she wants to be challenged beyond. So obviously you're doing a great job instilling those things. You just already kind of mentioned one or two of the ways in which you do that. Let's spend a 5 minutes on the father row and talk to, if you were talking to a young father or a parent that's struggling or something, and you were like, hey, here's three or five pieces of advice that I think can help help you lead your child to that kind of excellence. Like, what would it be?
Well, that's a great question for me, because I failed terribly at that in my earlier years. So I had two sons very early, right?
Oh,
So I had sons at 18, 19 years old, and back to back. So I came into my 20s with already two young children. I wasn't married. It was tough. I barely had anything much. So to have that responsibility young, on top of not having a strong family background, and it just wasn't the ideal situation on top of my upbringing, right? So I had to really force through a difficult time with trying to maintain as much respect and credibility as a father for my sons, right? Because that's important. And I wasn't raised with a strong family background, so I had to figure it out. I didn't know at that time the right way to be a father, because growing up, my father wasn't around as much. So it's a big difference, right? So you just fumble the ball as much as you can, but I picked it up. But from that experience, and I'm going to go fast forward, because positively speaking, to this day, I have an extremely close relationship with both of my sons. And I say in this day and age, that is rare, because I'm 44 years old, right? My sons are 23, 24. So we're kind of close. We can hang out together, but my voice is still enough for them that if I speak over the phone, that's all we need. I don't need yelling, and so I've learned a lot as an adult, and there was a lot that I made mistakes on that Michaela, now that I'm older and she's 6, she's taught me how to be a much better father, and I'm more mature, right? Where I am now in life is different. And the respect my sons have seen me elevate upward has given that. So I definitely want to say that, because that was important to me to say that I need to strengthen that as well on top of Michaela, right? But I say this all the time, and I said, if I could go back, the father I am now to all three of them is, I never thought I would be that father. But you know what it took? It took one for me to realize that it's okay not to give your children everything that you never had. That's a big one, right? Like, as parents, we truly believe when we raise our children, one of the primary functions of being a parent is to give them so much. So many of the experiences we never had, so many of the special occasions or birthdays or Christmases we never had. I never had a birthday party until truly I turned 40 years old. And that was an emotional time for me. At 40, I had people fly all over the planet to come to my birthday, and they didn't know my backstory, but I just developed a good network. But it was it was probably meant more to me than people ever knew, right? But what did I do growing up? Every birthday had to be fantastic for kids and all of this. And then we can become so superficial with our children sometimes that in that process, we lack the connection that they truly need. A child will always want more time than they would more material possessions. So growing up, I thought that as long as I bought my son something and gave them, that meant that I was a good parent. When if you ask any child, they can play on pen and piece of paper. As long as you're spending time with them on the floor, that quality time is super invaluable. So if I could tell a young father anything, don't stress yourself so much about the monetary goods. Make sure you have basic food and shelter, but give those children as much time as possible, especially from the years of 1 to 7. It is a powerful time for children. They develop so much, and that prevents trauma later in life that's sometimes very difficult to erase. That's one that I can't stress enough. The second one I would say for young fathers and mothers as well growing up is to, in that process, don't stop working on yourself, because you can become lost in doing so much to fulfill that. But I always use the analogy of when we fly on a plane, right? And we all fly a lot, that if the oxygen masks get deployed in a plane and you and your child are sitting there, well, the instructions is if the oxygen gets folded, you put the oxygen on yourself first. And most people will argue that, but then I say, okay, but if you can't breathe, how do you help your loved one? And I had to learn that in life, that guess what? Self-love is primary. It is the most important thing, is to fill yourself up so that you can fill your children and your family up, because children, especially younger, they read energy. And children know when the energy and the vibe is off, right? Because that's because you're not full and you're not maintaining, whether it's health or eating right or your personal relationships. And we dump that off on our children. And sometimes we rely on them for that emotional, it's not their burden to carry.
Right.
But we falsify that. And we're not aware of that as younger parents. We don't realize that until we get older. And that's when we say, what? Okay, now I'm going to focus on me. So if you can figure out, just find something you love, just to give yourself a little outlet from parenting so you can recharge and come back and pour more into them. Very important, which is why I take KMMA. And not only that, I take it with my daughter.
Absolutely.
Right. I would not have her there and not be there as a parent, like knowing what I know, because guess what? We practice together. We go to the dojo together. When we come home at dinner, we talk together. When we go in the garage, we work out together. She's going to remember that for the rest of her life.
Amen. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys are such a blessing to the dojo. And I appreciate you mentioning that. And I remember the piece of the story that you actually came in and trained for a while before you brought Michaela in.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about Michaela. But then when you said, I remember these words, you said, well, I wanted to make sure it was the right place first.
Yes.
So that also speaks to this, but I was writing notes like crazy because you were just spewing wisdom there. And I want to touch on two or three of them. And then I want to ask you some questions on one of them. First of all, you alluded again in your speech about the importance of leadership by example, right? Like, because you said, even with your earlier sons, you had talked about not everything being perfect, but you talked about how now you can call and they take your wisdom, and that a piece of that, you said kind of in passing, but you said a big piece of that's because they've seen what you've done with your life, right?
Yeah.
So it's the leadership by example. And then you mentioned the importance of not giving them everything. That was a mistake I definitely made. I want to give them everything that I didn't have. And I mean, I'm sure they'd argue they didn't have everything, but
For sure.
but I felt like and connection and quality time being the priorities. And what resonated with me that you mentioned earlier in a different conversation, but it resonated as part of this conversation, because you started then speaking parenting things that obviously you learned.
Yeah.
Right. So it goes back to that principle of being a lifelong learner, right? Like you wouldn't know that how important it is from 1 to 7 and all that stuff. Like you obviously read that stuff.
Yeah.
Read that stuff. Somebody told you that, right? You got that knowledge. So, and I guess maybe it ties to the fact that you did just, bring up the fact of you training together here. And you also talked about, don't stop working on yourself. So I guess all of those are kind of subplots of the idea that you got to keep learning and growing, right? Like Grandmaster Smith says, you're either green and growing or ripe and rotting, right? So
it's so true. And for a person like me, if you don't think that, strong people are strong for a reason. Mentally tough people are not strong because they're just born like that. They've experienced so much pressure, and they've had to overcome so many levels of adversity that they become tough. And they learn to push past even when they don't want to. They show up even when they are too sore to do so. It's a totally different element. And you gotta, let's talk about this. So I dropped out of high school because this is important, right? I dropped out of high school. My sons knew that. It wasn't until I built a relationship with my father at 28. So let's go forward. I didn't even establish a relationship with him because he was on private missions in the military, getting himself together and transforming his life so he can, pour back into his children. And then, so it wasn't until then that I actually moved to Florida with my father. So I'm just starting as a grown man. He's getting out in the military. And it is amazing what happens when you want to talk about leadership. So no high school education. I mean, I dropped out of high school, never thought of college. I was very entrepreneurial in many ways. There was always something there, but it needed to be shaped and formed in order to see what it was. Well, he clearly is a master at this, and I didn't know it. So he found a different way to reach me. And even as my dad, he became my primary mentor. And from 28 to 30, something happened. I finished my high school education. And one day at dinner, he said, "Hey, Miguel, I have a question." Because we cooked dinner over each other's houses. He moved me down here, helped me get a house and so forth. And he didn't do it just for me. He did it for my children. So he was thinking way past me. He was thinking that what my children, my young boys needed to see in the future, and then what their children would need to see from them. So I didn't see that, but he did. And so he said, "Miguel, you ever thought about going to college?" And I said, "College?" And I'm thinking, why? And he said, "This is some good chicken." And that was it. He didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. He just said, "This is some good chicken." So it was like a seed of infection in my brain for the next 3 weeks when I couldn't get, "Miguel, you ever thought about going to college?" And long story short, from the end of my 30 year to 34, I enrolled in college, graduated from college 4.0, became the president of I think your computer's on mute. I became the president of the International Honor Society. I don't think I can hear you.
I wasn't.
Oh, there you go. Okay, got it.
I
Okay.
wasn't talking.
Okay. I became the president of the International Honor Society. I studied in China with a delegation of the top business students in the world. And mind you, I'm older. And I was insecure about that, but that went away. I went to London and built a program for precision ceramics. And all this business skills was like highly elevated. And I'm thinking, where is this coming from? But the whole time he knew it. He saw something that I did not. Remember, it's different. That's why mentors are so important, because you've been with this vessel your whole life and you can only see what you can see. Wow. You can't see from the outside. You can look in the mirror, but you can never observe yourself as if you don't know you. And then he was able to shape by just planting little seeds, by not telling me what to do. He knew he couldn't do that. It would push me away. But he planted these seeds. But guess what he did most importantly? He moved me close to him so I can observe him. And when I observed him, every business meeting he went to at major companies, KBR, Honeywell, all these big defense companies, he just said, "Sit down and take notes. And afterwards, I want you to ask me any questions, and I want you to learn business and business etiquette." So just by observing not only business, but how a man handles business, I naturally harnessed that and wanted to be that without him saying, "You should do this." And it made me propel so fast in education that I had this newfound appreciation. But the best byproduct of that was my sons started looking at me saying, "Dad, I like when you do this," or "You think when I get older, I can," and I'm like, wow, is this the secret? Is this the secret? It takes a man to raise a man, because kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. And I never knew that. Absolutely. And so fast forward in full business, I fell into a career. And this is a guy that at this time only had an associate's in science degree, but he said, "Look, you're older. You're not a little kid. You got a degree. Get out there in the workforce and see what you can do. Just see what you can do. I think you'd be surprised." Within the next 3 years, I became VP of revenue for the mayor in Miami Beach. I started running multi-$100 million companies. And I had this natural skill set that propelled me forward. And you know where it came from? Nobody asked if I had a master's degree, because I didn't. I didn't even have a bachelor's. You know what I was able to do? Operate under extreme amounts of pressure, meet critical deadlines, and I can see things that nobody could, because me sitting in that room, I was not like them. So they needed somebody to be totally out of the box and left field. I came up in an era of guerrilla marketing and really building connections with real people, because that's all you have in the street. And you don't think that if you can polish that and move that into the boardroom, how powerful that can be in building relationships and in business. And that's really how this took place. So when I saw that in the light of my children made me more respectable, obviously, I wanted to further that. So I went to Harvard and I enrolled in their executive program, and I took courses there. And I said, for the rest of my life, and my long-term goal is to be a doctor. So I want to have a PhD. And it's going to happen. It's not a maybe anymore. It's going to happen. But it's just saying where you start is not where you have to finish. And I just don't make excuses for myself. I don't accept that from my family. If you don't want to do something, that's one thing, but we don't believe in I can't. We just say, just do it. If you fail, you won, because at least you had the courage to push forward. So,
And you learn,
and you learn. Yeah.
I either win or I learn, right? Yeah. Yeah. That's, man, you talked to so many things, but the coaching aspect, I think was really great. The idea that, it's the same if it's Krav Maga or kickboxing or much more important things, right?
Yeah.
Like that you're, obviously your father was a far better coach, like that'd be somebody that we could all learn from. Cause as I was listening to you, I was thinking about, man, I wish I did that. I wish I did, like, but it's
Right.
not too late. It's not too late because you were 28.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was. True
Yeah,
story.
so-
And I'm only 44. So a lot is, and that time, I mean, so much is you can never, tell a guy like me, I would have had, good credit and, buy a house, a big house, and, save and be well-versed in financial plan. I mean, so much took place, but it's amazing that when you have, you don't need 1,000 people. You just need the right 1 or 2 people that's showing you the right way, but you have to have that discipline to follow them. You can't think you know it all. Like that's the key. You can't have that, but until that is shaped, you got to shake that. And once you break that, sometimes people break it when it's too late and they're in trouble. And sometimes people wake up one day, especially kids with parents, right? Kids always think they're right. Parents are too old. Yeah, I don't know.
And that's such an important message on both sides, right? Like because me as a teacher, and of course I could go to the father route too, but right now I'm thinking about class last night. I'm out there teaching, and I actually ended up stopping and giving an impromptu lesson on, like, listen, this is a stripe test.
Yeah.
A stripe test is relatively easy. It's the last 2 weeks of material, right?
Yeah.
You had material, you had a review, and it's relatively easy. But what a stripe test really is, I told him, is a progress check.
Yeah.
I said, you should be figuring out what you do need to work on, because the progress checks are meant to prepare you for the bigger test, which is ultimately meant to prepare you for the black belt test, right? And the point that's relevant to what you were saying is some students, you could tell were hungry and eating that up. Like they got it. They got the idea. Okay, I got it. And I know what I need to work on. And you could tell the ones that were like just not receiving it, right? Yeah. And you see that in life. You see it with young adults. You see it with older adults, right? Like that, I guess it's what that cliche means: when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, right? Because you got to be willing to receive this stuff. I think that's so powerful.
Very true.
There's still so much to your story, and yet we've been talking for half an hour, and then I don't even know which direction we should go next. What do you think?
It's up to you. If you'd like me to shed light on how I even got into social media, I mean, I know in a day and age where so many people have their own businesses and they want to find ways to promote themselves. A lot of people are entrepreneurial since COVID. So if you think that'll be helpful, I can talk about how I even got there, because that's not my primary job, right? Yeah. So when COVID happened, interestingly enough, again, it's this leadership thing with family. My wife and my daughter, we had just moved from Miami back to Tampa. It couldn't have been a better time. Interest rates were low, and we didn't know COVID was within 1 month of happening. So I'd much rather my family be in a big house than in a condo in Miami. So timing was everything there, but unfortunately, we both lost our careers. Our careers plummeted because we were primarily in the cruise industry, right? So, wow, we got this new big house, new cars, and now income is down. There's not really much. You can't go out. So obviously, as the man of my house, I told my wife, let's just not worry about it. Listen, it's nothing we can do at this moment, but what we can do is just let's look at it as it gives us more time to be home together, and then we figure out how to make the best of it. Well, after a month or two, you could tell the energy in the house was not the best. So I said, you know what? Part of this is when we lived in Miami, we were socialized. We were in big business. We were out at dinners. We get invited everywhere. Now we're in Tampa. We're stuck in this house, new house, but after a couple months, it's a little boring. So I said, okay, I have an idea. I can't take you to dinner. Restaurants are closed. My wife loves brunch. I'm not a brunch person. I said, but I have an idea. Let's buy another freezer for the garage. Serves 2 purposes. If there's a food supply, we can stock up on food. Secondly, why don't we theme our new dining room that we haven't eaten in? Why don't we eat outside on the lanai, and we do a schedule and we pretend we're going to dinner? So I'll cook, you brunch on Sunday afternoon. We'll get dressed like we're going out. We'll have a good time. And then on Tuesday night, we'll go to dinner, but we'll do it in a formal dining room. We'll have steakhouse. We'll do candles. We'll do music. We'll let Michaela dress up in a dress. And this was our thing. And you don't know what this did to the house. It was like we were laughing, we were joking. Me and my wife drinking wine. Michaela, she can't drink wine, but she came up with a drink with cranberry, pineapple, and strawberries in it. And so this was the three of us just kind of like celebrating life. And I posted a picture of the dinner every night. And people were like, where are you getting this dinner in Tampa? At what restaurant is it? I said, oh, this is home. And don't forget, my network is all over the world. They're Indians, they're Jews, everybody. They're like, I never knew you had this. That's not you cooking. I said, okay, how about this? I will post our dinner for the next 7 days, but I'll use the same plate, like, so you know. And then so by the end of that 7 days, I have friends saying, can you show me how to cook that recipe? Because we're in the house and that's delicious. And I said, wow, Mel, you know, during COVID, people are much more focused on food, obviously, because they can't go out. I have an idea. I said, you want to stimulate our brains? I said, if I cook every day for 30 days, would you eat it? She said, yes. So I said, I'm going to write a cookbook. This was in March of 2020. I said, I'm going to write a cookbook. I don't know anything about recipes and cook, but I'm going to create what we do over COVID. And I'm going to release it on June the 7th on my birthday morning, and then make it for pre-sales for all my friends and see if it does anything. Long story short, 2 months later, the book became a #1 bestseller on Amazon. I was blown out of my mind. And then fast forward a couple months, and then COVID slowed down. We got a small contract for consulting. But then all these people were like, I bought this book, and it's unfortunate you don't have videos on YouTube. You don't have anything on Instagram. And I'm thinking, oh, what have I done? You know, I didn't intend to cook. I'm not really a chef in the sense of it. And so people are like, I'm in South Africa. I'll never forget this lady. South Africa, she said, I made your lasagna, best lasagna ever. And the only thing I could think of is, you made that lasagna in South Africa? Like, really? Like, you bought the book because you could buy digital if you can't get the physical. And I'm like, Mel, you know what? I'm just going to create a separate Instagram, and I'll put, when I cook you dinner, I'll just put the videos up there. Well, fast forward 1 year, I grew to 1.3 million followers. All the celebrities were sharing my food, and I had to start taking it serious. And now my consulting business is back up. We're making money. And I'm like, unfortunately, I'm a chef now. And I came out, then I turned it into a sauce line. I created a nonprofit.
Oh, I love your
That's a whole nother, it just breeded into this big thing. And I said, you know what? This was supposed to happen, because if I didn't write the book, and then I wrote a second book, that became a bestseller for Christmas. And I said, if I didn't do that, I would have never been inspired to open a foundation that helps kids cook. And I would have never been inspired to create a sauce line, because I didn't want to ask my network for money. So I said, let me create a product that sells, and I'll just donate the money to my foundation and fundraise myself. Wow. We build programs for schools. And that's what happens. What happens is I understood marketing, I understood business, but I didn't go to school for marketing. Wow. But God said I have something else. And so building a brand was easy for me, because I dealt with the head of Rolex and Hublot and all these diamond brands in the Caribbean. But it was preparing me that when I built my own brand, I can truly do something that gave me impact. So when I do stuff for kids and I'm donating, that is the most fulfilling out of anything I do. And I'm not sitting in a boardroom, because it affects them and their house and a lot of other stuff. So that's the best part of all of this, is that I came from nothing, and now I'm able to give back to children that maybe don't have the resources to learn how to cook steak and lobster. Maybe they even haven't ever eaten it before, but now they're inspired when they walk away, and I'm able to donate this time. And then I give them, you know, food packages to Publix, so they can take their skills and go home and cook for their family. That's really what it's about. And guess what? Learning marketing and all of that stuff, it has paid off. And it has been the most rewarding out of the whole journey.
Man, I wish we were in class so I could say, give me claps. But man, let me tell you what, that is powerful stuff, which, you know, what's wild. And again, see, we didn't plan it this way. Yeah. What really happened, the way you became a social media influencer, is because as you said, you were forged in the fire. And when all of a sudden you found yourself in a situation where most people have been sitting around moping and complaining, and why is this happening to me? I can't believe I just bought this house and this pandemic happened and da 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 da. You instead said, man, what am I going to do with this situation? Where's the opportunity in this problem? You know, life is 10% what happens and 90% how we react to what happens. I mean, you did everything to just prove that that thing is real. And, you know, I thought about this somewhere in between two of your earlier story and now is because you were talking about how your difficult past prepared you for all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I know you probably don't have much more time, so we'll be wrapping this up real
No,
soon.
go for it. Yeah.
But you know, not everybody has that blessing.
That's true.
So I was thinking kind of similar to what you said with the cooking for the kids. I think it's one of the most important things we do for kids at Krav Maga Martial Arts. If they happen to have, and let's face it, a lot of the people that are in our place, they're blessed in that they don't have the struggles.
Yeah.
They don't know what it's like. It's hard. They haven't developed the muscles that comes through hard work. And I think it's one of the things we do for them, right? Because in those 4 years from wherever they began to being a tough enough person to pass our black belt test,
Yeah.
they have developed grit and resilience and the things that you're talking about, you know, that we got the hard way, right? But
True. Yeah.
but they got them. They get it too, right?
Yeah.
What
No,
would you
that's
say?
so
What
true.
would you say to that? Yeah. What would you say to that in closing?
In Krav Maga specifically, listen, for me, and I'm going to tell you, I have zero time throughout the week. You know, I need another hobby, like I need a hole in my head, right? Or I need another anything. But I'll tell you, and this is not saying it because it's the right thing to say. This is truth. If you're a student there, if you're a parent not sure of if this is the right thing for your child or any of that, I'll tell you, being an adult is going to be different, right? Adults, we have all of these little micro hangups and we got all these things where we can question ourselves and we can say, well, it's not as important as paying the bills and all these things. But from my counterparts in KMMA, and you have a lot of successful people who have careers and have families, and you know they could be utilizing that time to spend with their family. But guess what? For them, it is a way to reduce stress. It is a way to earn some life-saving potential skills. And not only that, it is a way to stay fit and keep the joints greased up and moving and working because they want to be there a long time for their family, right? That's a very vital part for an adult. But the kids I really want to speak on is because, you know, sometimes it's not cheap to put a child into anything that they're going to get something great out of. And kids will doubt themselves, no doubt. But, you know, as a parent, you know, no matter how strong my daughter is, you don't think some days she said, Daddy, can we skip today? And you know what I always tell her? I said, we could, but what did Grandmaster say that one day? I'll never forget you told her that. You were giving a lesson and you said, you know, it's on those days. And it's funny, when you said this, it was that day for me. You said it's on those days where you kind of say, you know, it's been a rough day and I just, today is not the day. That's actually the day that you should do it. But when you do it, you should give it 100%. And I can guarantee from experience, when you do it on that day, you feel exhilarated and like, wow, I'm glad I did it. Now, if you reverse engineer that, every other little day that you question yourself, you've already did it on the day you said, I absolutely cannot do it. And you did it. And you did it amazing. So there will be parents that question that. But for me, it has been an incredible journey, one that I am seeing far exceeded past my first, second, third, possibly fourth degree black belt, because it is a life choice. It is a lifestyle. It is a life decision. Not so much of the self-defense, but let me tell you, when you enter into the junior level and above, I think a lot of parents wake up and are like, uh-oh, this is where it gets real good. And so stay in it, because I told my daughter, you're in it. You know what I tell her? I said, you're 6 years old. You know how much you work. And, you know, my daughter used to play with the cell phone in the game. Now at 8 o'clock at night, she said, Daddy, can you see if my nunchuck skills are getting better? You know, to me, that's that's amazing, because the money we pay for it. And now it's her idea. It's not my idea.
Come on. Yeah.
It's her idea and she wants it. But I say, imagine when you're 20, you know how many stripes you're going to have on your belt. And that's what it is. And guess why? Because the generational curse is broken now. So
Oh.
self-defense and safety and security and confidence, biggest one you build from this. You cannot pay enough money to have your child be very confident and be able to look somebody directly in the eye and know that if there was some type of threat, that they can disarm themselves if needed, right?
Yeah.
You can't pay for that type of confidence when you walk in. That's going to help them in the classroom. That's going to help them in opportunities. That's going to help them in the boardroom. And that confidence is what I finally got from 28 to 43. And I want my daughter to have it at 6 and 7. So that's my statement there.
Bam. Thank you, brother. Man, I got to tell you, I knew this was going to be one of the best, and it has exceeded expectations. You are a pillar of wisdom. Your energy and enthusiasm is infectious, and man, I am so proud and grateful to have you in our KMA Black Belt Leadership family, especially now that I know you're planning to train to 4th degree and beyond.
Yeah.
You're going to be one of the awesome master instructors running around here.
Yes, sir. And I thank you too. And everyone's really grateful for the time you put in, the wisdom you put out. And it's not easy from a person that is active on social media, and here lately, not as much as I could be, but you're extremely active, and they don't see that part if that's foreign to them. That's a lot of effort that you put in on even writing a simple blog. You know how difficult it can be sometimes when you talk a lot through certain mediums. You're like, okay, what am I going to talk about today? That's taxing. And on top of that, you have to be a leader. You show up, you instruct class. So hats off to you and the staff there as well, because it's we see it.
Well, thank you, sir. Means a lot. Well, hey, thank you for this amazing time. Thank you for making the time. And by the way, I know you had a little procedure recently. You healing nicely? You gonna be back real soon?
I'm healing nicely. It was a little more intensive than we thought, but I just can't do any grabbing or any lifting because the stitches. But unfortunately, I have to fly out of town today, but I come right back in the morning. So no heavy lifting this evening. But it's okay. I'm taking my time. I'm not being hard-headed.
Good.
I'm not being hard-headed, but I look forward to being back soon and getting back to work.
And of course, in the meantime, I've been seeing Michaela. She's still coming. So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, sir, thank you so much. God bless, and have a good, safe trip, and we'll see you back soon.
Thank you so much. See you soon.
Bye-bye.